All right, and so we're going through talking about different kinds of dairy products, and this is a chance for you guys to get to see all the different milk kind of sitting right next to each other and kind of gets compared and contrast. Now, ideally, you'd sample them all kind of right after another. If you have the chance to do this at home, go for it. That's awesome. If not, you're just going to have to take my word for it today and kind of see. But first things first, as you kind of back up and look at the differences, here we've got our whole milk. So again, whole milk has 3.5% milk fat in it, so we leave a good chunk of that in. Some fat in our diet is needed, right? Fats are one of the things that are required for humans, especially as you're growing. So this is why whole milk or 3.5% milk fat is usually something that we'll feed to small children, typically under the age of 1 or 2. Once they get off formula and things, it's a good transition. That way we make sure they have enough fat in their diet for their, there goes the chinchilla on my shoes. Zoom, there he goes. He just kind of scared me a little bit. Where's Waldo? No, where's Pip? He's the chinchilla. Anyhow, yes, he's running around, but we have dairy products. That's super sanitary. He's just hanging out. Anyhow, as I was saying before I got rudely interrupted by a varmint, 3.5% milk fat, so we need this little higher fat in younger people's diets to help your brain, your skin, your nervous system to develop the way that it's supposed to. Doesn't necessarily have to come from milk fat, but it's a good source of it, especially as you're transitioning from formula to real foods. 2% milk has 2% fat left in it. That would kind of make sense. 1% has 1% fat left in it. Again, makes sense. So this would be considered a high-fat milk. 2% and 1% would be considered low-fat milk. And then we've got our skim. Skim is considered non-fat milk. It's kind of misleading because it's not fat-free, but it is a lot lower fat. So usually we're looking at about 0.5% of fat that we've got left in there. Now, as we look at these cartons kind of from a distance, you can see our whole milk looks kind of a brighter, darker white color compared to our skim almost starts to get a little bit of a yellowish tint to it. And that's because we've got a higher percentage of fat that we've got left in here, okay? You'll also notice because this milk has been homogenized, you don't see it starting to layer up and you don't see the fat particles starting to separate themselves. So if you're like, what's homogenized mean? Go back and watch some of my other videos or look it up. Either way, basically it keeps the fat from sticking together, okay? And then separating, and then we have to shake, shake, shake. So we're gonna start out, like I said, you're gonna have to take my word for this, with our whole milk. As we pour it into our glass, we can see, again, kind of a brighter white color as I sample it. It's got a pretty thick texture to it. I personally like the taste because I grew up with 2%. We had whole milk in the house a lot. So I'm more of a fan of the 2% whole milk. If you grew up with skim and 1%, you might not necessarily like this as much because it's going to have a thicker, creamier kind of texture to it and taste to it. But again, it depends on your taste buds and kind of depends on what you're used to. Some people have gotten converted from skim and 1% up because they all of a sudden realize they like the taste better. Some people don't. It is what it is. 2%, so as we look again, as we pour, it's a little bit more of a yellowish color compared to our whole milk. There's not really a ton of taste difference. It is just a little bit on the watery side comparatively. It's kind of got a more mellow taste compared to the richness of the whole milk. 1%, now is when we really start to get into kind of more of the yellowish color. The texture is a lot thinner. This is where I really start to notice a difference because, again, I grew up basically with 2%. A little waterier, definitely not the same kind of flavor and taste that we're getting at. And then we've got our skim milk, or 0.5% fat milk, or non-fat milk. This is really where you start to notice the color difference. As we kind of see here, it's a lot more yellow, definitely a lot runnier and not quite as thick as we've got with the rest. Not my favorite, personally. But anyway, the last thing we've kind of got on our list here is almond milk. Now, it's kind of a pet peeve of mine that we call it almond milk because you cannot milk an almond. Almonds cannot lactate. They are not a mammal. So therefore, it should technically be called almond juice. Words, definitions matter. This is why we go through definitions with everything. Almond milk, in order to get this, basically what we're doing is we're crushing the almonds, extruding the juices out of them, and then adding more stuff back into it. So to me, it should be called almond juice, not almond milk. And it should probably be over by the juices, not by the dairy products. But considering we're using it as a milk substitute, that's why we stick it over there. Plus, in most cases, it does actually need to be refrigerated. Now, this happens to be vanilla flavored, which means they're going to add some sweetener and some flavoring to it. Straight up almond milk that's been plain, a lot of people don't really care for it. I think it tastes like cardboard personally, but again, it depends on your taste buds. And if you're lactose intolerant and can't process milk, it might be your best option unless you go with the lactase-free milk, which is starting to become extremely popular. You should be able to drink some of that depending on your level of lactose intolerance. Anyway, the almond milk, by contrast, if you notice, this has a lot darker of a color. The thickness or the texture here is a little bit thicker. Like I said, I'm not a huge fan. This is a vanilla flavored. I bought it because people are more likely to drink it. Like I said, the other stuff, I personally think it tastes like cardboard. This tastes more like an Almond Joy, which in that case, I can handle it. And so you can see kind of it looks a little bit different. Smell-wise, it smells kind of like almonds, a little bit sweeter. The last class was talking about the texture more like chocolate milk because they've got more sweetener and more sugars added to it. It gives it a little extra thickness as well. It's okay. I prefer the dairy products over the almond juice personally. Again, not a dairy product. It's a substitute that we can stand in place for milk products. But we're going to talk about it along at the same time we talk about our dairy products because it is something a lot of people are starting to substitute with. So that's kind of the differences in our milk.